I left my millionaire husband because he refused to work. I didn't read the prenup. I thought he was lazy. Now I bag groceries while he retires at 30. There is a toxic idea in our culture that says if you aren't suffering, you aren't succeeding. We fetishize the grind. We applaud the burnout. We look at people who have found peace, who have hacked the system to find ease, and we call them lazy. We call them unambitious. We call them lucky. I was the high priestess of that toxicity. I worshipped at the altar of stress. I believed that cortisol was the fuel of champions. And I sacrificed the best thing I ever had because I couldn't stand the sight of a man who was happy without suffering. My name is Andrea. I am 28 years old. Until 6 months ago, I lived in a $3 million contemporary home in the Hollywood Hills. I drove a white Range Rover. I had a husband who adored me, a closet full of designer clothes, and a life most people would kill for. Now, I live in a studio apartment that smells like mildew, cat litter, and microwaved ramen. I drive a 2010 Corolla with a cracked windshield and a check engine light that I can't afford to fix. And I spend my days scanning barcodes, asking people if they want paper or plastic, and praying that nobody I used to know walks through the automatic doors. My husband, my ex-husband, was Julian. Julian was 30. He was handsome, kind, and incredibly intelligent. But he had one flaw that drove me absolutely insane. He didn't work. Not in the way I thought a man should. Julian came from money. Old money. His father was an investment banker who taught him the market before he could walk. But Julian wasn't a trust fund brat who blew it all on parties and cars. He was a savant. When he was 20, he took a small loan from his father and invested it in crypto and tech startups before anyone else saw the potential. By 25, he had turned that loan into a fortune. He cashed out at the peak. He bought our house in cash. He set up a diversified portfolio of dividends, bonds, and real estate that paid him a passive income of roughly $30,000 a month. And then, he stopped. He retired at 26. Julian's routine was the same every day. It became a source of visceral irritation for me. I would wake up at 6 a.m., slamming my alarm clock, rushing to shower, chugging bitter coffee, checking my emails with one hand while applying mascara with the other. The house would be silent. Julian would wake up at 9 a.m. He would walk into the kitchen in his silk robe, looking rested. He would grind fresh beans. He would make a pour-over coffee, measuring the water temperature with a thermometer. He would stand by the window, watching the birds, sipping his perfect coffee. Then, he spent an hour reviewing his portfolio on his laptop, moving money around with a few clicks. And then, he played video games. 4 hours. Call of Duty. Elden Ring. FIFA. I would come home from my corporate marketing job at 7 p.m., exhausted, stressed, my feet throbbing in my heels, checking emails on my phone, and I would find him on the couch, headset on, laughing with his friends online. "Hey babe," he'd say, pausing the game, looking fresh and relaxed. "Dinner is in the oven. I made lasagna from scratch. And I folded the laundry. The towels are warm." He cooked. He cleaned. He paid every bill. He was attentive. But I couldn't get past the image of him holding that controller while I was out there fighting the good fight. "Did you do anything productive today?" I would ask, kicking off my heels, my tone dripping with resentment. "I rebalanced the tech sector holdings," he would say, unbothered. "Made about $4,000 before lunch. Then I finally beat the boss in the fire temple. It was intense." "That's not work, Julian," I would snap, pouring myself a glass of wine with shaking hands. "That's clicking buttons." I was in meetings all day. I dealt with clients screaming at me. I managed a crisis with the PR team. That's work. Why do you want to suffer, Andrea? He would ask calmly, taking off his headset. We have enough. You don't have to work that hard. You could quit. You could consult. We could travel. We could go to Italy next week. I work because I have ambition, I said, puffing out my chest. Because I want to build something. Not just leech off the system. Not just get lucky. It wasn't luck, Andrea, he said softly. It was leverage. I used my brain so I wouldn't have to use my back. Isn't that the goal? No, I argued. The goal is contribution. You're just existing. I saw him as a child. A lazy, lucky man-child who didn't understand the value of $1 because he never had to sweat for it. I looked at his ease and I felt envy, but I disguised it as moral superiority. I hated him because he was free, and I was enslaved to my own ego. I needed someone who understood the grind. Someone who shared my hunger. Someone who smelled like stress. I found him in the break room. His name was Mark. Mark was my age, 28. He was an account manager at my firm. He was always sweating. He was always stressed. He stayed late every night. He wore cheap suits that didn't fit right, but he wore them with such intensity. He walked fast. He talked fast. He was always putting out fires. Rough day? Mark asked me one night at 8 p.m., as we were both heating up stale coffee in the microwave. My husband is probably fighting a dragon right now, I sighed, leaning against the counter. I'm fighting a deadline. Mark laughed, a bitter, cynical sound. Must be nice. To be a passenger in life. To just coast. I bet he's never calloused his hands in his life. It's infuriating, I said. I respect a man who builds. A man who hunts. A man who comes home tired because he actually did something. I'm hunting every day, Mark said, staring into his coffee cup. I'm trying to make VP by 30. I want to rule this place. I want to build an empire. I don't want anything handed to me. I want to take it. It was intoxicating. Mark validated my worldview. He made me feel like my stress was a badge of honor. He made me feel like Julian was the enemy, and we were the soldiers in the trenches. We started having lunch together. Then dinner. We would complain about our bosses, about the economy, about how hard it was to get ahead. We bonded over our shared misery. We fed off each other's negativity. I compared Mark to Julian. Mark was real. Mark was a warrior. Julian was just a player. Julian was soft. Mark was hard. The emotional affair turned physical during a late-night inventory audit. We were alone in the office. The fluorescent lights were humming. The adrenaline of the deadline mixed with the adrenaline of the attraction. We kissed in the supply room. It wasn't romantic, it was desperate. It felt like two drowning people grabbing onto each other. We convinced ourselves we were a power couple. We're going to take over the world, Mark whispered to me later, as we lay on the floor of the conference room, the city lights blinking outside. Leave him, Andrea. He doesn't deserve you. He's dead weight. You need a partner who runs at your speed. Imagine what we could build together. I started to believe the fantasy. We would spend our lunch breaks planning my divorce. He has about 10 million in liquid assets, I told Mark one day, calculating on a napkin. Plus the house. If I get half, that's 5 million. Plus alimony. We could start our own agency, Mark. We could be CEOs. That's justice, Mark said, his eyes hungry. He didn't earn that money anyway. We'll put it to real use. I planned to leave Julian. I really did. But I wanted to secure my bag first. I wanted to make sure I got half the house, half the portfolio. I figured I earned it by putting up with this gaming for 3 years. I figured I deserved hazard pay for being bored. But I got sloppy. We both did. We started sneaking away during work hours. The supply closet. The parking garage. We thought we were invisible. We thought we were smarter than the system. We didn't know that IT was flagging our emails. We didn't know that the security cameras in the garage were high-definition 4K. On a Tuesday afternoon, I was called into HR. I walked in, expecting a promotion. I had my notebook ready. Mark was already sitting there. He looked pale. He was sweating more than usual. The HR director, a stern woman named Linda who never smiled, turned a laptop screen toward us. It wasn't a performance review. It was a video. It was footage from the parking garage, level P3. Me and Mark. In his Hyundai. It was unmistakable. It was graphic. This is a violation of company policy regarding workplace conduct, Linda said, her voice devoid of sympathy. We have a zero-tolerance policy for sexual activity on company property. And frankly, this is gross misconduct. We're fired? Mark asked, his voice trembling. Effective immediately, Linda said. Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be mailed to you. Do not log back into the system. We walked out of the building with our cardboard boxes. The power couple. The hustlers. We were unemployed. We stood on the sidewalk, the sun glaring down on us. It's okay, I told Mark, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. This is just a setback. This is part of the story. I'll divorce Julian. I'll get the settlement. We'll use the money to start our own firm. We'll show them. This is just the beginning of our empire. I drove home. I practiced my speech in the mirror of the visor. I was going to tell Julian that I had outgrown him. That I needed a man, not a boy. That I was taking half of everything he leapt into. I walked into the house. It was quiet. The TV wasn't on. Julian wasn't gaming. He was sitting at the dining room table. He was wearing a suit, something I rarely saw him wear. There was a man sitting across from him. An older man with a briefcase. Andrea, Julian said. He didn't stand up. He didn't smile. This is Mr. Henderson. My lawyer. Lawyer? I asked, dropping my box of office supplies on the floor. Julian, what's going on? We received a call from your company's HR department about an hour ago, Julian said calmly. They called to inform me, as your emergency contact, that you were terminated. And they felt obligated to share the reason, given the nature of the misconduct. My stomach dropped. Julian, let me explain. And, Julian continued, sliding a thick manila folder across the mahogany table. I received these photos from a private investigator I hired last month. You see, Andrea, you haven't been subtle. You've been grinding with Mark for weeks. I knew something was wrong when you stopped complaining about work and started staying late every night. He opened the folder. Photos of me and Mark at lunch. Photos of us entering the parking garage. Photos of us kissing in his car. He knew. He knew everything. I'm filing for divorce, Julian said. Today. The petition has already been submitted. Fine, I spat, trying to regain control, trying to channel the anger I had practiced. I wanted a divorce anyway. I'm tired of living with a lazy gamer. I'm tired of being the only adult in this house. I want half, Julian. Half the house. Half the accounts. It's California. It's community property. Julian looked at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson smiled a shark-like smile. Actually, Andrea, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. Do you remember the prenuptial agreement you signed 3 years ago? The one your independent counsel reviewed? I glanced at it, I said. But we've been married 3 years. Prenups can be contested. I contributed to this marriage. Not this one, Julian said. And certainly not with Clause 14, the infidelity clause. He opened the document to a highlighted page. In the event that the marriage is dissolved due to proven adultery, the offending party forfeits all claims to spousal support, asset division, and marital property. The offending party leaves with only the assets they brought into the marriage. Proven, Julian said, tapping the photos of me and Mark. And confirmed by your termination letter from HR, which cites sexual misconduct. It's ironclad, Andrea. You can't leave me with nothing, I whispered. I have no job. I have no savings. I spent my paycheck on clothes and the car lease. I'm not leaving you with nothing, Julian said, standing up. I'm leaving you with your ambition. You love to work, right, Andrea? You love the struggle? You love the grind? Well, now you have it. You have the ultimate grind. He pointed to the door. Get out of my house. Your car lease is in my name, so leave the keys. You can call an Uber. I left. I had no choice. I walked out of the mansion with one box of office supplies and my purse. I went to Mark's apartment. It was a studio in the valley. It smelled like stale pizza, unwashed laundry, and desperation. The contrast was physically painful. I went from 3,000 square feet of open-concept luxury to 400 square feet of stained carpet. We'll fight it, Mark said, pacing the small room, sweating. We'll sue him. We'll find a loophole. We couldn't sue him. We didn't have money for a lawyer. Julian had the best firm in the city. I spoke to 3 attorneys who all told me the same thing: the prenup is solid. You cheated. You lost. We tried to get new jobs. But the tech industry talks. HR directors talk. We were blacklisted. No one wanted to hire the 2 people who got fired for having sex in the company parking garage. It was a liability risk. The savings ran out in 2 months. We had to move to a cheaper apartment. Then a cheaper one. We sold my designer clothes on Poshmark just to pay rent. Mark sold his watch. Finally, we hit rock bottom. The grocery store is hiring, Mark said one night, staring at his negative bank balance on his phone. Night shift. Stocking in cashier. I am a marketing director. I screamed, throwing a pillow at the wall. I have a degree. I am not bagging groceries. You were a marketing director, Mark yelled back, his face red. Now you're broke. We need to eat, Andrea. The electricity is going to be cut off tomorrow. So, we took the jobs. I work checkout. Mark stocks shelves. The grind isn't sexy when you're making minimum wage. The struggle isn't romantic when you can't afford heating. Mark isn't a warrior anymore. He's just a tired, angry man who smells like onions and body odor. We fight every night about money. We fight about whose turn it is to pay the electric bill. We fight about who ate the last egg. I don't love him. I resent him. I look at him and I see the mistake that ruined my life. He's the anchor that dragged me down. But I have nowhere else to go. We are trapped together by poverty. Last Tuesday, I was scanning items at Register 4. It was 6 p.m. The after-work rush. My feet hurt. My back ached. I had been standing for 6 hours. I saw a couple approaching the belt. They were laughing. They looked happy. Clean. Expensive. It was Julian. And holding his hand was Sarah. Sarah was a mutual friend of ours from college. Years ago, she had told me over drinks, "You're crazy if you complain about Julian. He's loyal, he's rich, and he stays home. He cooks. He cleans. He's the catch of the century, Andrea. If you don't want him, I'll take him." I had laughed at her. I had told her she had low standards. I thought she was boring. Now, she was wearing a diamond ring. A massive one. It caught the fluorescent lights of the grocery store and sparkled like a star. Her skin was glowing, the kind of glow you only get when you sleep 8 hours a night and don't worry about rent. Julian looked great. He was wearing a casual polo, but I knew the brand. It cost $400. He looked rested. He looked 10 years younger than Mark. He put his basket on the belt. Premium steaks. A bottle of vintage wine. Truffle oil. Organic vegetables. The kind of food I used to eat without thinking. The kind of food Mark and I can't even look at now. He looked up. He saw me. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I was wearing my green vest. My name tag was crooked. My hair was frizzy because I couldn't afford my stylist anymore. My nails were chipped. "Hello, Andrea," Julian said. No anger. No malice. Just polite indifference. Like he was talking to a stranger he vaguely recognized. "Hi, Julian," I whispered. I couldn't make eye contact. "Just these," he said. I scanned his items. Beep. 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 The sound of my failure. "How are you?" Sarah asked softly. She didn't look smug. She didn't look gloating. She looked pitiful. She looked at me the way you look at a stray dog shivering in the rain. "I'm working," I said, forcing a smile. "Staying busy. Keeping the hustle alive." "That's good," Julian said, checking his watch. "You always loved to work. You always said work gives life meaning." He tapped his card. Approved. "Keep the change," he said to the bag boy, even though there was no change. He took the bag. He took Sarah's hand. He interlaced his fingers with hers. "Ready to go?" he asked her. I paused the game. "We can finish the level before dinner. Or I can cook those steaks while you watch." "I can't wait," Sarah beamed, leaning into him. "I love watching you play. It's so relaxing." They walked out. The automatic doors opened, and I saw his car parked outside. A new Porsche 911 Turbo. I watched them drive away. I looked down aisle 3. Mark was there, mopping a spill. He looked up at me. He looked exhausted. He looked defeated. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had lost everything. I realized then that I had it all backwards. I thought Julian was lazy because he mastered the game so well he didn't have to play it anymore. I thought he was a child because he knew how to play. I thought Mark was successful because he was always playing, always struggling, always sweating. But the goal of the game isn't to play forever. The goal is to win. The goal is freedom. Julian won. He figured it out. He used his mind to buy his time back. And I punished him for it. And I I'm still grinding. Just like I wanted. I'm suffering. Just like I wanted. I have the struggle. Just like I wanted. But nobody tells you that the hustle is just a trap. And once you're in it, it's very hard to climb out. If you think the grass is greener on the other side, be careful. Sometimes it's just astroturf painted over a septic tank. And sometimes, the lazy man is just the smartest guy in the room. Hit that like button and subscribe. #TheHustleTrap